Hello, welcome to Workout Wednesday, week number 4 for Power BI. What I would like to show you today is a challenge that originally started with my enjoyment of hex maps in Tableau and really thinking through, how could I add a hex map into Power BI? What that led to was a long process of digging through lots of different options on how to do that and ultimately finding that synoptic panel, a custom BI visualization, also that comes with a online tool, is a great solution to do this. And quite frankly, a great solution to do a lot of custom visuals. So very excited to bring this challenge to you. I hope you like it. So what we're building is a hex map using some state-to-state migration data from 2019 from census.gov for the United States. And what you do here is you select a state of interest. In this, I live in Wisconsin, so we'll select Wisconsin. And what I'm going to see is highlighted in dark green are the states where people have migrated to Wisconsin from the most in 2019. So here you can see for Minnesota, there were 17,524 people moving. And then in the last 5, or I guess you could say the rank from 5 to 10, you have a little bit of a lighter green. And this shows you visually that most people are moving from Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, Florida, and California. But also we see Texas, Montana, Colorado, Iowa, and New York as other states that have people moving to Wisconsin. The other nice thing is alongside here is a chart that can show you just how many are moving from various states into Wisconsin, and of course the ability to click and very quickly be able to see in both charts what are some of the areas of interest that you see. Looking forward to showing you guys this. This is my first Power BI challenge, so very excited to share this and many more challenges to come. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. What I've done is I've loaded the data.world URL that's in our blog post. And what we're going to do is we're going to load in the state-to-state migrations table as well as the state mapping table. So let's go ahead and go to the state-to-state migrations table. What you're going to do is click up here and open with Power BI. There should be some additional loading options that show up for you. You can go ahead here and open that up. This is going to show you what to fill in the data.world connector. So if we go back here to Power BI on our split screen, and we go to get data and we go to additional sources here, let's go to data.world. Clicking into here, you'll see that we just need to copy and paste the values that it gives us here. So once we do that, we'll hit transform data. Let's go ahead and right away rename this query. So right click on the query and let's call it state migration. Then let's go ahead and load that second data source. So I'm going to move this window a little out of the way so that it doesn't interfere as we look at the state mapping. So click on state mapping and go to open with Power BI again. And now let's load that second source. All right, so we're going to go to data.world again. Click on get data set. These are all the same values with the exception of the last one, where we're just selecting all of the rows and columns from a different table, which is our state mapping table. Let's go ahead and hit OK here. And we will rename this state mapping. Okay. Now we're ready to go ahead and start transforming our state migration data. All right, let's go ahead and build our data model. The first thing I'd like to do is start to look at the format of this file that we have here, the state migration file, and then understand the end format of what we're trying to get to. Ultimately, what we're trying to say is what were the states that people moved to, and what were the states that people moved from, and then what's the population that moved from one state to another. And the way that this file is set up is this first column is actually the state that someone currently resides in. If you scroll to the right, you're going to notice that there is state information in our columns as we move across. Here you can see Alabama and Alaska And these columns that say estimate are estimating the population that's moved from Alabama to the various states in this first column. So what we want to do is we want to bring those state values up to the top. So let's go ahead and first start by promoting our first row to headers. When we do that, you're going to see we have Alabama and Alaska. And the nice thing about this is the very first row is the estimate row. So we've already got the state as it should be labeled for the column that we're going to need. The thing that I like to do in circumstances like this where there's a lot of noise is actually just unpivot all of these columns. That's going to give us the columns we want in a certain column. And then later on, we can use our merging with the other queries to actually filter out some of these values that are not relevant. So the first thing that we should probably do is rename these columns so that we don't get confused. So the first one is the state 2. Again, if you remember from back before we unpivoted all of these columns, that there was the state list of where people resided. This next column is the state from. And then this column is the population that we see moving from one state to the other. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to want to do is actually look at changing the population moving to a number. We could have done this now or later, but let's just go ahead and do it now. So let's change this to a whole number. And then if you right click on the column itself, we can actually change errors to nulls if we want to. So if we scroll through the data, you'll notice there are places where we have a state 2 and a state from that are valid, where we have actual values for population moving, but we don't want to have all these errors in here. So let's replace errors. And you can actually just type in null, and you'll see that it replaces them with null. Okay. The very next thing that we're going to want to do is start to merge the state migration file with the state mapping file. This is going to do two things. One, it's going to give us the abbreviations that we're going to want for these states, but two, it's going to actually allow us to filter out all of these values that are not states. The first thing, though, I want to do is point out a possible issue that we would have when doing this. If you just go through and you start mapping the state mapping to the migration file, you're going to lose the District of Columbia. The reason that that happens is if you do some exploratory data, you're going to notice that the District of Columbia value in state 2 actually has an extra space in it. So what we're going to want to do is make sure we don't have any extra spaces. So what we can do is click on the state 2 and state from and actually go ahead and trim those. For some reason, it doesn't want to let me trim them. There we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and actually merge the state mapping file with the state migration file. The first thing that we want to do is get the state 2 abbreviation. So let's go ahead and go to merge queries. We're going to merge the state migration file to the state mapping, and we're going to use state 2 and state as the things that we use to map. When we do that, we're going to get a file here for, well, we're going to get a table of what matches the state 2 and the state from the state mapping. We're going to expand. We're going to only include the abbreviation. And then we're going to just rename this to state 2 abbreviation. Okay. Now, same steps for state from. So we're going to use state from. We're going to do the state mapping to the state. We're going to hit OK. And we're going to expand and only show the abbreviation. And here we're going to say state from abbreviation. And let's go ahead and move these to places where they're closer to their corresponding fields. And then the nice thing that we can do is, because we've done this mapping, we can look at only the things that matched. So we don't want to include anything that didn't have a state match. And what this has actually allowed us to do is we are able to now only look at the states that people have moved to, the states that they've moved from, and then the population that's actually been able to move to those states. All right, now that we've gone ahead and finished our data model, let's close and apply. And now we'll go ahead and start building the visualizations. All right, first things first, let's go ahead and click Get More Visuals. And let's bring in our synoptic panel here. So let's go ahead and type in synoptic. You can see synoptic panel by OKViz. Let's go ahead and add it. All right. Now, if we click on synoptic panel, you're going to be presented with some options. There's categories, subcategories, measures, maps, etc. I'm not going to go through the detail on how to use this. I'd recommend you go look at the documentation if you want to see some of the details of how to use some of the more advanced capabilities. We're going to stick with just a category, a measure, and then later on some states that allow us to change the colors of the values. So let's go ahead and start by doing our state from abbreviation as the category. This is going to be the name that we show on all of the states in our hex map. And then our measure is population moving. Now, what you're going to notice when you first bring these in is there's no map assigned in synoptic panel. They have their own gallery, which is where we're going to actually get the hex map. But later on in the tutorial, if you stick around, we're going to show you how to do some custom visuals. I think there's some neat things that you can do with synoptic panel that if you're interested in trying and wanting to share over Twitter, feel free to do so. I think it would be great to see your guys' designs. But we're going to actually go into country territory, and they already have a hex map defined and available for us. And I always find it hard to find, but this time there it is. So now we actually have a starting point for our hex map. Now that we've got the start of a hex map, we can go ahead, and add the slicer for our state 2 column. So if you remember, the hex map here is showing us the states from that people are moving to, but we want to be able to select the state that people are moving to. So in here, let's go ahead and add state 2. Let's make it a drop down, and let's make it so that you can only select one value at a time. You go to format your visual. In the slicer settings, there's a single select option. Let's select that. And immediately you're going to notice when we click on states that it's actually being highlighted in the map. The reason is, if you remember in our data set itself, if you have a state 2 and a state from that are the same, the value is actually null. So if you go back to the options within our synoptic panel hex map and you go into the data colors under the format visual, you'll notice that there's an unmatched color. And here, let's go ahead and add a kind of a dark gray color. And that'll be the color that dictates what we've selected. One of the things we haven't done yet is added data labels. So let's go ahead and add the data labels. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And let's position it in the middle. So now you can really easily see Iowa selected, Kentucky selected, etc. All right, now the next important thing that we do is we segment out these states by some form of condition that allows us to evaluate whether they're the top 5, whether they're in the 5 to 10 range, or whether they're below the rank of 10 in terms of population moving. So for just the time being, let's go ahead and start a new table. Let's grab our state from. Let's grab population moving and sort that. And let's look at what we have here. So what we want to be able to do is understand, is Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, and Mississippi in the top 5? Here you can see that they are, but how would we, be able to tell this map that? The first thing to do, the easiest thing to do, is to just rank order these. But you have to keep in mind they are being affected by this filter, right? If we just rank order them over the whole data set, we're not going to actually get the order that is specific to the filter of, say, Alabama or California, right? So let's go ahead and create a new measure. This new measure we're going to call rank. We're going to call it, or we're going to use the rank X function. Now, keep in mind that because we have a filter, right, in this first argument for the rank X function, we need to put in a table name. In this case, we're going to put in a subset of the table that's affected by the state 2 column. And we do that using this all except function. So now we have the table, which is basically everything that's been pre-selected with Alabama. The next thing that we want to do is provide an expression. So that would be the sum of population moving, right? And if we bring that rank in, looks like everything is rank 1. Now, why would that be? This actually is something that I always remember is adding calculate around an expression is important when you're going to be evaluating it row by row in the view. So in this case, because we're looking at Florida, Georgia, Tennessee one by one, adding calculate is the way that that actually allows it to be evaluated at the right context. And so what that does now is we get the rank order from top to bottom for all the states from. If we change the filter, continues to look relative to the state 2 selected. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and add colors around some states around rank. All right, I think we're ready to go ahead and start adding colors to this hex map. So if you remember looking at the file itself, these first 5 values are going to be a dark green color. The next 5 are light green, and then everything else is gray. Again, feel free to use your own color scheme. I think there's probably better ones than the one I chose. But let's go ahead and look at the hex map visual here. And if we look at the format visual, you're going to see a couple things. One is data colors. And we already talked a little bit about the unmatched color and how that's basically anything that doesn't have a value is colored in that color. In this case, it's the state 2 that we select. And then a default color, which is the color of everything else. Let's go ahead and just change that to gray. That'll be our default state. And then under states, you're going to see that they have the option of defining states around a particular measure. We have not added our measure, but let's go ahead and add our rank that we created to the states measure. Now, if we go back to our states, you're going to see that we're going to actually be able to create colors that are around that. I've got a cheat sheet up here for my colors, but going back to the states, if it is less than or equal to 5, let's color it this dark green color. And if it is less than or equal to 10, let's color it this color. So now you can see that we've actually already got the workings of a good map here. One of the things that I really like to do here is do some initial formatting. So let's go ahead and on population moving, let's just make sure we add a comma. Just seems a little bit cleaner. And then what I'm going to actually do, because not everyone, especially those not in the US, know what NH is or VT or PA, let's just go ahead and add the state from into the tooltips so that they're there. And here you can see that we have state from abbreviation, population moving, our rank, and our state from, just for the sake of good formatting. Let's just rename that. And now we have our hex map. All right, now let's work on the bar graph. Let's go ahead and take that table that we were using just to look at our rank calculation, and let's just go ahead and click the stacked bar chart here. Let's get rid of rank, and here you can see that we've got from top to bottom our population that's moved from various states to Connecticut. Here you can see most come from New York. Let's go in here, let's go to bars, and let's define the colors based on a rule. In this case, we're going to be looking at the rank. If you remember, if it's less than or equal to 5, we want that color to be green. Okay. Here you can see that works. Let's go ahead and use my cheat sheet here for the other color. Let's go back in and go back to bars, and let's add another rule. And let's say if it's greater than 5, and less than or equal to 10, then we want this color. Let's add a rule, and then if it's greater than or equal to 10, and I'm just going to say less than or equal to 100, we'll just say it's this. As I was going through final formatting, I noticed that actually the colors here weren't working as I expected them to. I went very quickly into the bars and the definitions we have for them and noticed that there were two issues. One is this needs to be number, not percent, because we're working with a rank, and also I need a greater than instead of a greater than or equal to. Now, once we're here, we can delete my cheat sheet and go ahead and start final formatting. All right, let's go ahead and move on to some final formatting. So here, first thing I'm going to do, rename this to 2022 week 4. This is just a cleaner tab name. And let's start moving some stuff around. Let's insert a title. So here we're going to insert a title. It says 2019 state to state migration. Let's center that. Let's make it a size of, let's just make it big. And I always like how Georgia looks for titles. So let's go and do that. And then underneath, let's say, who's moving where? This one, let's make 18. Let's size that appropriately. Okay. Now we have a title. Let's go ahead and move our slicer up here to the top. We'll resize a lot of this here at the end. It's a slicer. Let's go ahead and go into the slicer header. And let's change this to an instructional statement. Let's say select a state to see, select a state to see where new residents move from. It's my question, so we'll take out the question mark. Let's resize it so it just is about as big as it can be for the title. And let's kind of center that here in the middle. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and move on to the hex map here. Well, actually, one thing, this header, just a tiny bit smaller. Well, let's keep that bigger, and then this selection needs to be, I think, a little bit smaller. So in values, let's just move to 9. Just makes it a little bit cleaner. Okay. All right, now moving on to the hex map. First things first, let's get rid of this title. There it is. All right. And let's actually make those data labels a little bigger. I feel like they're a little small. Maybe 15 is just a little bit better. We'll go ahead and do that. I think we've done everything we need to do with the hex map. So let's move over here to the bar. First thing I'm going to do, let's remove the titles and the labels from the x-axis. So we just get rid of the x-axis title and the x-axis. Nice thing there is it takes away the grid lines as well automatically. Let's get rid of that y-axis title. The y-axis itself feels a bit big, maybe. I like 8 a little bit better. Let's go with that. Let's get rid of the title here as well. So I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here, guys, but and then let's go ahead and add the data labels to this. Let's make sure we add them to outside the end. And I makes them a little bit smaller. And I believe we can move things around a little bit here, but I believe we're good to go. So we would save this to our desktop and or publish it based on your preferences. And we now have a dashboard that allows us to select a state, see the states that were the states where people moved from the most, and be able to visualize that in a couple of different ways. Well, you'll notice that the top 5 are not colored correctly, neither are the second 5. Again, just to redo or reiterate what I showed earlier in the video, these need to be changed to numbers, and this needs to be a greater than sign, and everything works as expected. So apologies for that mistake, and thank you guys very much. All right, one of the bonus items I wanted to show you guys was just the power of this Synoptic Designer for Power BI. As I mentioned in my blog post, Synoptic Panel consists of 2 things. It's a custom visual for Power BI, but also a online tool that allows you to define SVG documents that you can import into Power BI and use for various purposes. What I did here was I just created in a PowerPoint this very basic view of a person, right? And so we have a head, body, 2 arms, 2 legs. I saved that, and actually, if I load that into Synoptic Panel, you can see that we have these different areas that we can select. And it's very easy. You just click the areas. And instead of 1, let's just say this is a head. Instead of 2, this is a left arm. Instead of 3, this is a body. 4 is a left leg. 5 is a right leg. And 6 is a right arm. Select export to Power BI. All I gotta do is hit save the image as this. So I'm gonna download the SVG document to my pictures. We'll just call this body. And let's go to Power BI and have a look at this. Okay, now that we're in Power BI, I just went ahead and created a custom set of data for the different body parts we just created. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the Synoptic Panel. If you don't have it added, go to Get More Visuals and add Synoptic Panel. But if I click it and I start pulling data in, I'm going to pull the part in as the category, and the measure is injuries. And what I can do is I can look at a local map, which is this body.svg that was created from the Synoptic Panel. If I open this, now I have the ability to actually look at how many injuries have occurred by different body parts per this data set I created. And the thing that we didn't show is there's actually in the data colors area, you can change your default color, but you can also do something interesting, which is look at saturation. So saturation is just the darker the color for the highest amount of injuries. And here you can very easily visualize where more injuries took place. On the head, a few on the arm and body, and then a couple on the left leg. So you can adjust that to, you can go to 50% saturation. You can go to 100% saturation. You have a lot of options. You can change the colors. Again, we can do what we did in the challenge, and you can do different variations of states. You could create different buckets that you would want to put these colors in, but really super powerful. You can create your own custom visuals and color them and show them in a dashboard however you would like to do that. So I just wanted to share that with you as well, in addition to the challenge. Hope you all have a great week, and thank you again.